Committee, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to the Distinguished Teacher Lecture, which Dr. Laura Donorfio will be presenting. The Faculty Development Committee is responsible for receiving applications for this highly selective honor and selecting 2 awardees every year. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Laura and then present her with a certificate in recognition of her award. When I first saw the packet of nomination for Laura, I was struck by her innovation and the depth and breadth of her work, and I thought, wow, this is a promising candidate. In her cover letter, one of her nominators notes that Laura grew up in a strong Italian family in which the older generation significantly predominated. Her attention to, and I'm quoting, an interest in the senior members and their family dynamics captured her attention, and it became the nucleus of her graduate studies and then teaching career in 1993 in the School of Family Studies at the University of Connecticut. Since then, she has created a range of courses in adult development and aging, which are now standard offerings at the University of Connecticut. She is regarded as the expert in this area and draws large groups of students to her courses. All of her courses, in fact, are oversubscribed. Having had a very successful face-to-face teaching career, Laura took on yet another task, and that is distance learning. So she now teaches students at all 3 of our regional campus via an interactive video system called ITV. It's noted that in one of her courses, her students range from age 53 to 98. And some of the student evaluations are quite outstanding, actually. Laura holds an MA from the University of Connecticut in the School of Family Studies and Human Development and Family Relations and received her PhD in 1996 in the School of Family Studies and Adult Development and Aging. Her particular areas of interest are family caregiving, filial responsibility, transportation in the elderly, education, of course, student engagement through distance learning, and qualitative research methods. So I unfortunately can't stay for Laura's lecture because I have to go to another symposium that I'm involved in. That's how it works at these meetings. And I would like you afterwards to welcome Laura to AGHE. I believe this is her first meeting. She's expressed an interest in becoming involved. This is the kind of leader we want in AGHE. So please, just introduce yourself over the course of the 2-day session. Laura will be talking, as you can see, about oldies but goodies, how to increase student engagement in traditional and interactive television courses on adult development and aging. But first, Laura, if you could just stand up here, and I guess we don't have a camera, but whatever, we can recreate this moment another time. On behalf of the Association for Gerontology in Higher Education, I'd like to present you with the Distinguished Teacher Recognition for excellence in the teaching of gerontology, commitment to students, and maintenance of the highest academic standards. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome and good morning to everybody. I'm going to use the mic on my lapel, so could you hear me in the back? If you came in late, I do have some handouts on the chair over there if you would like to get them, if there are any left. Thank you very much. This is perhaps the biggest honor of my life. I love older adults like people love chocolate. If you go into a room with chocolate and you lose all sense of time and space and place, that's me with older adults. I could go into a room of older adults and I just forget about everything else except talking and being with them. And the greatest honor for me is to be able to turn that over to my students, which I think I have. And I have a lot to go over today. I probably won't get to all of it, but I couldn't decide what I wanted to leave out and what I wanted to keep. And so I have about 70 PowerPoints. So we'll see what we could get through. And I want to keep it interactive. So I have a couple of goals. Here's an overview of what we'll be doing today. I like to walk, so would people prefer me to walk up here or to walk down there? Whatever? Yeah. Whatever, okay. I want to try to make this presentation real to you on 3 different levels. The first level is I do have an overview of what I want to accomplish with you today. And I do this with every class I teach at the beginning of every class. And it was really amazing. One student one time said to me, no one's ever wrote down what they want to accomplish in my class before, so I thought that was interesting just at that level. The second thing I'd like to do is I would like to make it as interactive as possible within the time frame we have, but probably the most important is I'd like to model for you how I actually teach a class, and not on the aging content, but on the teaching content. So what I'm going to do is model for you how I would teach a class, but on the methods I use, okay? Now, when they sent me the letter of congratulations and that I was receiving this award, they said to me that they wanted me to cover the following things, and they're up there. They wanted me to tell you how I teach about my chosen topic, how I develop my courses, topics I focus on and on and on. So I'm going to try to hit all of those. In my classroom, the very first thing I do on the very first day is I introduce myself, and I introduce them, have them introduce themselves, and I'll tell you a little bit about me and what I think helped with my development in being a teacher. But the very first thing I do is I pass around 2 books per class off my bookshelf that have so impacted me, I hope they'll impact the students. So this is one way I start to engage students right off the start. And it's amazing because by the 3rd week, they're bringing me books in. And then sometimes they'll purchase me books, which is always a bonus. But I want to tell you the 2 books that have impacted me as a teacher. The first is Parker Palmer's The Courage of Teaching. And I'll pass this around, and he has a chapter in there on fear. And I've kind of taken fear to the next level, and I look at it as risk, which I'll talk about today. But perhaps the best book that I could just pick up and start to read anywhere is Letters to a Teacher by Sam Pickering. Has anyone heard of Sam Pickering before? He was the person that was the main character in the Dead Poets Society, that movie. And he's a faculty at UConn. And he writes about the different campuses he teaches at. And so it's just, it's a great, great book. So I'll pass that around. And I find with students today, they don't just like to do one thing, they like to multitask, and that's fine with me, so I like to have them doing several things at one time. And I found that that works. So I'll pass a book around, I'll start the lecture, so on and so forth. So just to give you a little background about me, I have 15 years of teaching. I've taught approximately 15 courses. I have a lot of different colors up here, and I want to tell you why they're important. I've had a class size of 1 to 250. I've taught both undergraduate and graduate, but today I want to concentrate on undergraduate. Independent studies, traditional, and ITV. Now I have 250 students underlined, and I have ITV circled because those were the 2 biggest variables or attributes that impacted my development as a teacher. When you teach to a classroom in 4 walls, 20 to 30 students, it's very different than taking what you do and opening it up to 300 students or opening it up to students that are not even on your campus. So I'll explain to you. When they first asked me to do an interactive television course, I thought, how am I going to engage them when they're not even in the same room as me? What am I going to do? My research interests include older driver transportation and caregiving, but I have to say my passion and love is starting to go into the whole pedagogy of teaching, and especially with respect to aging. Another thing that impacted my development is I taught for a number of years, was offered a corporate gerontology job with AARP in the Hartford, and it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, so I left academia for 6 years, went into corporate America, and that was a life-changing experience because they told me that I was giving them basic knowledge, but they wanted applied knowledge. And when I went back into the classroom, I realized that what I was giving them was basic knowledge, and what they really needed was applied knowledge. How could they use it? How could they go out there in society? How could they go out there in their everyday? So it was a big aha to me. So I came back as a much better teacher after that 6-year respite. I always look at it as a postdoc, even though it wasn't. I also have professional training in group dynamics and also modification and accommodation, which I also think helps me look at students to see what their specific needs are. I don't treat the whole class as an entire class, but I teach them as having different learning needs, and what might work for one isn't going to work for another. So if we had time, and if we had about 10 of you, I would go around to each of you and I would find out your name, your specialty area, and what you hope to take away from today's session. Now it's important to me to know your specialty area because then I can incorporate that all through the course with respect to the lecture. If I have a business person in my class, I could show them how adult development and aging relates to business. If I have a nursing student in my class, if I have an art student, I do a lot of art and where aging has come with respect to art. So it's very important to make that personal connection right up. And they're very impressed that I want to know. I won't remember their name, but I could remember what major they are, which is very bizarre. And also, if I go back one slide, what do I want them to take away from the class? I ask them on the first day of class what they want to take away and have them write it down. And then 4 weeks into the class, I hand them that paper back and have them reread it and say, is this still what you want to take away from this class? So I have them interactively and engaging from day one right through to the end. And they'll look at it and say, what did I put that for? Some students will put to get the grade, you know, and then you go back and I hope you're embarrassed by that. What do you want to get out of the class really now that you've had it for 4 weeks? So objectives. There are 4 objectives I'd like you to leave here with that I hope I could attain today. The first is identify 5 engagement strategies that you can use in any course you teach, whether it's an interactive television class, whether it's a distance learning class, totally online, whether it's a 4-wall room class. So this, I'd like you to leave with this. I'd also like to have you rank the risk for you and for the students associated with these engagement strategies. What I've realized is for the first maybe 10 years of my career, I've been presenting students with engagement strategies that are low risk for me. And I realized, my God, it's not low risk for them. No wonder why they're not engaging, because this is so, I started to look at both sides, the student and myself, and we're going to talk about that today. And that's, I haven't seen that in the literature. I've heard many people use the word fear, but I've not seen sort of this risk continuum of where you could place engagement activities. The third, list the barriers to implementing various engagement strategies. And there are basic ones, but then there are ones that we don't think about that I think if we could mention in some way, it could help us in the future for using more engagement strategies. And lastly, explain whether or not engagement needs to happen in a timely manner. This was a very big aha for me. For some reason, I think being teachers, you feel that you need immediate results. Everyone needs to get an A. Everyone needs to raise their hand. Everyone needs to talk. That's how successful you are. But I realized that it doesn't have to happen immediately. And I'm going to tell you a story about that. I think Sam Pickering actually taught me that also. He taught a whole class from underneath a desk to see if he could do it. Could you imagine? Yes. They were intrigued. One student said it was the best lecture he's ever had in his life. So how I teach about my chosen topic. Over the years, I've developed what I call practical pedagogy. And it's interesting, I just saw another sort of term for someone on in our list there of people presenting term there is maverick pedagogy, so I thought it was kind of funny. But so practical pedagogy. I really try to combine with my business experience the basic course knowledge, but also the applied course knowledge. And I constantly try to marry up practical application with class theory and material. But for me, the biggest piece is this engagement piece. To me, that's what brings it to life. And I have a little video of me explaining this. So if I was teaching you, I would bring in many video clips and media clips. So this is what I'm doing with you with respect to engagement. Now, our university has an exemplar series where they've asked 8 or 9 faculty how they do what they do well. They've actually taped it, and they've put it up on our website, so I've included on there. They talk about large classes, they talk about active learning, and engagement. So if you'd like to go and see what different faculty are doing at UConn. So let me... The basic principles that I adopted when I started working with undergraduates was what I term, it actually is a framework, and I term this framework practical pedagogy. And it took me quite a bit to develop this, but I realized after many years what was very important to me was trying to get across 2 tenets to the students. One was basic course knowledge, and one was applied course knowledge. And under the tenet of basic course knowledge, what was important was that I showed them why the information was important, why the course material was important, how it fit in with existing research and literature and theory. But to me, what was almost as important was this applied course knowledge piece. Not only why it was important, but how it was important for them in their everyday lives. How it fit in with their family structure, their community, and how it could actually fit in the course material with possible jobs or present jobs that they have in careers. Students' faces light up when you tell them how you could take a course content and apply it to a job. They really, to see that connection, it's invaluable. So if you were a class, I would introduce some media clips and some short snippets from the internet. Just to give you a little background about student engagement, if you had to pick a term, I think, for this decade of teaching, one term is engagement. I mean, it has really reached the high heavens with respect to the respect it's getting finally. Student engagement has become an essential aspect of meaningful learning. Everywhere you go, every educational conference I've gone to, it has active learning, engagement. The NSSE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement, and the Community College Survey of Student Engagement, reports have shown that high levels of engagement increase both learning and education and retention. And I can't agree more. So what I've been thinking all these years is research is showing is an actuality. Engagement strategies benefit both the student, but they also benefit the instructor. And I think that sometimes we forget how using certain strategies benefit ourselves as well as the students. It's not all about them. And at the end, I'll show you that I think engagement is both our responsibilities. But research continues to report that traditional lecture modes still dominate colleges and universities. I think they did a survey and it was upwards of 80% that still consider themselves to do traditional lecture. And Tinto had a great quote in 2002. He said, "Learning is still very much a spectator sport in which faculty talk dominates and where few students actively participate." And so I thought we have to change that, especially in the area of adulthood and aging. My development over the years, if I think back, I really did a one-way engagement with students. If I think back to 15 years ago, I did what I would call passive learning, which is giving students information that they could passively take in, such as presentation of information, material, connections to content, written feedback on assignments. I was losing the big picture of their feedback back to me. The aha came during my next stage, which I would say was about 10 years into my career, which is how important active learning was in the whole educational process. Students participate in their learning process as opposed to passively taking it in. And one day I was sitting with a colleague and she and I made a top 10 list of all the engagement strategies I use. And I realized with that top 10 list that all of them were passive. And I was so embarrassed. I said, "Oh my God, Kathy, everything I have listed here is engagement from my vantage. It's not engagement from theirs." And we both just sat there. I said, "Oh my God, we have to change this." So it was my mission from that point on to say, what could I do to engage students that actively engages them versus me just passively engaging them? The next step, which I'm at currently, is collaborative-based learning. My big, where I hope to go over the next year, 2 years, is to actually incorporate service learning into my interactive television classes. And I'll show you what that's like. A colleague told me it's like a circus, but I'll have you decide what you think. So the first activity I'd like you to do is I would like you to write down, we're not going to talk about them now, but it's going to be something you put down and then we're going to approach at the end, is I would like you to write down 3 activities that you currently do to engage your students. They could be anything, whatever 3 activities you use. And if you're not an educator, then put what you think you would do. There are no right or wrong answers. I have eye contact is one strategy a faculty use, and the last time I made this presentation all the way up to taking them on a field trip. So it's all what you use and what you're comfortable with. And then once you write down your 3 strategies, label them as passive, active, or collaborative based. So are you passively imparting knowledge onto your students so they work with it in their mind? Are you actively imparting knowledge where they're actually working with you? Or is it a collaborative sort of, involving 3 or more entities, you, the student, the community, you, the student, other students? Now let me just open it up for a question, and this is just off the top of my head. Why do you think it's important to have strategies at each of these levels? Yes?
Students learn in different ways.
Exactly. What else?
You have some students who will never in the
But you know what's funny is you don't think they're engaging, but they are. And I'll explain it at the end. You can't assume just because they're sitting there being quiet that they're not engaging. And that's probably the biggest learning, I think, over my career, is that it doesn't take that. What else? So different styles of learning. Yes?
So your classroom doesn't become boring.
And not only for them, but for you.
Yeah.
I mean, you know when you're boring. You're up there, you're lecturing, and you're blah, blah, blah. You're looking at the clock, and you just, you know, it's time to get out of here today. So, I mean, it helps both of you. And they see your excitement also. And they have taught me so many different things, students. You know, they've taught me terms like starter marriages. I do adult development in AGHE. We do a whole lecture on marriage and what family is today. And they taught me that starter marriage is a term they use, like a starter home. You get married, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's okay. So it's a two-way thing. We'll come back to that. I'm going to have you wrap everything up at the end with an overall activity. How I develop my courses. If you were to think about someone coming up to you and saying, we would like you to develop a course on X, what would be the 3 or 4 attributes or variables that come to mind that would be the most important in sort of developing that class? I'm opening it up for...
We develop goals on various levels.
Okay, various goals for the content. What else? Yes? Who's in the class? That's very important. Yes?
How it's delivered. I was just asked for web-based classes. I've never done a web-based class in my life. And this semester I'm teaching 6 different classes in the semester. So the first thing is, I'm interested in how I can interact with the students and keep them engaged while doing this web-based class.
It's keeping you up at night. Well, this should help you because this is the same sort of what I'm going to get to by the end. What else? Another comment? What else is important to you when you're developing a class? Yes?
I like to look at how other people have developed in their class.
Sort of starting with maybe their syllabus or... 3 years ago, I was asked to give graduate students at UConn a lecture on what variables I bring into developing my course. And oh my God, it was the first time anyone asked me to make it a tangible thing. I thought, what do I use? So this is what I've come up with. And don't get overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed. And I couldn't even leave any of this out. This is my style. I've included this PowerPoint in a full-blown version for you that's separate than the PowerPoint. But I'm also going to go through each one of these quickly. So this is what I think goes into developing a class. And I'm going to tell you what the students think goes into it also, because we've done research at UConn on what students value. So I think there's a whole teacher variable, which I think is the most important. And if we go back, I have the teachers actually standing on connecting with the students, i.e. engagement, because that's really my platform. So here we have teacher variables that I think are very important. And some you can't use with some different modes of delivery, like, web-based, you can't smile, unless you put a picture of yourself up there every day smiling and welcoming them. I guess you could do that. Humor, you could have a little joke on their web-based a day. That's what I do. But these were the components that I felt really differentiated me as a teacher. I play dumb sometimes. The students love that. I don't know if they know or not, but I'll say some erroneous statement, and they'll get so indignant. And they'll say, but Laura, how could that be? I'll say, well, tell me, how could it not be? So it gets them involved. I show enthusiasm. I have them call me my name and not a title. I'm very uncomfortable with doctor. It just makes me feel like they're talking to someone else in the room, so it's always Laura. Informal style, I could be very formal, but informal, I don't mind if their cell phone rings as long as they go into the hall with it. Or I don't mind, I have many older non-traditional students that have families. And if I knew I was going to be in a class for 3 hours where I didn't know if my son was, okay at the doctor or not. So I tell them they could bring food. If it's good, I want to share it. If they're expecting a call, as long as they go outside, and you won't believe the respect I get for that. It's quiet as anything. So it's almost like I didn't go to the extreme of, oh my God, you're late. You ever have that professor when you walk in late and they make everyone know that you're late, or they lock the door and they don't let you in? I just say, welcome, relax, calm down. Things in life happen. A couple of things I do is I say, how is everybody today? I begin every class with that, no matter if I have 100 students or 200. And they'll answer me, and it kind of gets us into the mode. I'll say, did anyone do anything fun this weekend? And you'd be surprised what they'll come up with, even if it's 1 or 2 things. So it's not about me, it's about them. And you wouldn't believe how that step into, getting to know them brings them a step closer to the material. It's unbelievable. Evaluation. If you came last night to Dr. Dunning's talk about evaluation and how people don't always evaluate themselves correctly, I have at least 3 evaluations per term with all my classes. I have a formative one in the middle. It's either it's a blind, so they could tell me how I'm doing, a summative at the end, but I also have the university evaluations. And I have to say, if I didn't have those, as you'll see, I wouldn't know that they were not getting some things I thought they were getting. So that's very important. Class variables, I think, are very important when you're developing a class. Not only the course format and size, if you have 1 student versus 30 students versus 200 students, time of day, is it 8 o'clock in the morning class? Is it 11 o'clock? Is it at night, right after dinner when everyone wants to fall asleep? Student learning styles, classroom layout. Sometimes I'll come into a classroom and change the layout because I think it's more conducive for everybody if it's a different layout. Student composition and equipment needed available. So really, I would say that teacher variables and class variables are top of mind for me. But then it's how do I impart this engagement piece? And this is what I call tools. And I'm sure you all have your own toolboxes. I'm sure you all have a bag you could reach in and take out different strategies that you use. Over the years, I've developed probably over 30 different strategies, and I've actually included in your packet not only my strategies I've used in a traditional classroom, but what I've used in an ITV class and what students have told me they'd like. So you have that in your packet. But I do the book and article of a day. I hold the class somewhere else. I make sure at least 1 class per semester is held out in the community. In Waterbury, it's not the best location for the campus in Connecticut, so I actually take them out and students will say, "This is the first time I've been out of the 4 walls of the university." It's kind of enlightening. I'll look at them and say, "Really?" So they park their car, they walk in the building, and they walk out. I provide mind maps, and I'm going to do a mind map exercise with you. I have debates, I have scavenger hunts, I have a toolbox. What I've done, it's very corny. If I was very wealthy, I would equip everybody with a real toolbox. But because I'm not wealthy, I buy a $2 thing at Staples. But what I do is I give a lot of handouts, and I want to make the material tangible to them. So I actually spend time cutting and taping and putting whatever class it is. So this is a death and dying toolbox. And I give them this the first day. And you see them carry it through the whole semester. Then you go over something, they undo it, and you'll see how this came back to really show me how important it is with the story I have to tell you later. But I'll pass around my made-to toolbox. Nothing special, just the time and money. Experiential exercises, field trips. How did I take a field trip in a traditional class and do an ITV field trip? Well, I had them go on their own and take a guest. And I'll tell you about that, but I'll get into all of these things. So what attributes most strongly contribute to student learning? So here I thought that, those things I laid out, the teacher variables, the class format, and the tools were the most important thing. So this is what the students told us is most important. Faculty attitude and behavior. I kept reading that and I said, well, where is the content in that? Faculty attitude and behavior. So it wasn't so much, they saw them as the expert. They wanted the next level of the attitude and behavior that they provided them. So we asked them, I started to say, well, I have to know what attitude and behavior is. So the next time we gave this survey, I asked them, what do you mean by attitude and behavior? They said a passion for the material, approachability, ability to challenge, and a sense of humor. Those are the 4 attributes that students at UConn at the graduate level over the last, I would say, 5 years, we do this every year, indicate that are important. The second variable that they felt was the most important, this is not for international students, this is just US-based students, because we found a difference. International students, it didn't matter what sort of physical classroom they were in. But for American students, the second most important attribute was the class environment, the physical classroom. And when I asked them what that meant, did it have all the tools they need? So, you just can't sit them in a room. They want to bring their computers. They want to have technology. Could they hear the teacher well enough? What sort of topics do I focus on? Well, this is very interesting because I've included in that packet to you a syllabus for an adulthood and aging class that I teach. So you can see the basic topics that I cover, and they're very traditional: theory, research, you know, tasks in adult development, Erickson, so on and so forth. But I wanted to take my topics to another level with the students. So you could look at the syllabus and you could see what sort of structure and assignments I have. But what I started doing, and I don't know why I started doing this, and when I first started doing it, I could have kicked myself. I'm one of those people that sometimes speak before I really think about something, and then you get yourself in trouble. So I was in a class, and I was a death and dying class, and a student brought up to me about Hindi ritual of a death and dying. I thought, gee, I've never covered that, you know. And I said, well, you know what, I'm going to add it to the syllabus. We have some time. I always leave one class for wiggle room. I said, I'll add it. I said, is there anything else anyone would like to add to the syllabus? This is your course. You're paying for it. You're here. What's not on the syllabus that you would like to? And students come to you. They don't do it in front of everybody else, but they'll come to you after and say, you know what, I have a real interest in domestic violence, and I don't see it on here. Or I have a real interest in X, Y, and Z. So I started opening it up to the students, and it's very flexible, so then they have ownership. They feel that they're helping with the syllabus as much as you've created it. So it's a joint effort, and it's kind of fun, the topics that I teach a human sexuality class across the lifespan. Students actually had me add human trafficking this past year. It was probably one of the best topics I've ever could have added. I wouldn't have added it on my own. We get complacent sometimes. I think we look at our topics, we think they're all there. You get a new topic from a student, and you won't believe the students. You could hear a pin drop. They're listening to my human trafficking lecture. Help students identify what they want to get out of class, and that's just what I did with you. The very first slide I said, you know, who are you, what's your discipline, so I know I could connect with you, but also what do you want to get out of the class. And what I do is do this 2 or 3 times during the term, so if it changes, so that by the end they really have a strong idea of what they're taking away from your adulthood and aging class. And I always tell them, it doesn't matter what discipline you're in today, because with the impact of the aging boom, no matter what career you're in, it will be a very valuable tool for you. And so they start to see that just knowledge about adulthood and aging is going to help them. I said, you could work for Hallmark Cards. You could have a whole line of older adult cards. You know, you could work for, you could be an accountant and do at-home accounting service for people that can't get out of their homes anymore for, you know, your taxes. So I try to make them think very creatively. So as I said, I do a class session time 1 and 2. I'll do up to 3 different intervals of what they want to get out of it. And the first one, they're very sort of hesitant to tell you. But then by the second and third, they're sharing with each other. They're sharing with you. Hey, I want to get this. I didn't get this out of it. And lastly, the biggest is, how could I relate it to their everyday major and the everyday world they could apply it? So I always keep this in the back of my mind. And when I come in, and it's interesting, it ends up being a big discussion in the class, a conversation. It's not just me lecturing anymore. And then it's, you know, student B telling student Z how something they saw could help them. And then it's student M telling student A, you know what, I came across this, and the whole networking starts. And it's amazing the way the students start to really take a different type of ownership. I don't know if any of you have experienced that. How many of you have opened up your class to more discussion type, and you find that they're telling each other things, and they forget you're even there? I swear, I could just step back sometimes, and they start with each other. What have you found?
Well, I emphasize that I'm a learner, and that we're all teaching learners. And I teach doctors, so it just, we have conversations. And if they're interested in something that I'm not familiar with, I don't know that, but I know someone across campus, that person comes in the next time, and we'll have another conversation. And, you know, people will come in with their PowerPoints, and I said, we don't have that. Sorry. We could have a conversation, and they were told this, but they didn't understand. This is a conversation, and it's great. Everybody enjoys it so much.
And I think it's almost liberating when you could let down the guard and say, you know, I don't know everything. I'm not going to pretend to know everything, but you could help me. And I'll say, does anyone know? Okay, the task for next class is everyone go on the internet and try to find out. And they do. But you know what's even more interesting is if someone comes with a computer to class, because then I'll have them go right there and find out the information. And they love it. I'll be like, oh my God, what's the current poverty rate for a family of 4? I know last year it was 21-something thousand. What's it this year? They'll go on, they'll come back. Laura, it's so-and-so. And it's just, it is. I leave there, I'm all pumped up and ready to go, I guess. Classroom exercise and activities. This is what I see as my engagement toolbox. And before I get to that, I want to bring in this risk factor again, because I think it's very important and it will help people understand not only your vantage, but the student vantage. So I told you at the beginning that I would emphasize what are some of the barriers to classroom activities and exercises. So I've listed some, but I'd like to hear what you have to say also. Class size is a barrier. If you have 300 students, you really have to retool what you're doing versus 30. Limited class time. If you have a 50-minute a week, 3-time-a-week class, it's very different than having their whole attention for 2.5 hours. Subject matter. Death and dying. Of course, I would never teach on ITV. But you know, adult development and aging has been great to teach on ITV. So how sensitive is the topic matter? Increased prep time, always doing engagement strategies. You're going to increase your prep time. Impact on teacher evaluations. I'm not tenured yet. So every time I think of doing something new, I think, will my evaluations go down? You know, will that impact me? And I'll show you how that comes out at the end. University culture. Some departments don't like you to be engaging. Some departments, people in departments actually feel threatened and because the students like you and you're engaging them, but they don't like me and they're not engaging me. So you have to kind of walk a fine line. I don't share very much. Probably people on the outside world know more about what I do and the graduate students than the inside people, just because I don't really feel comfortable yet sharing everything I do with them. But the last is fear. And in the Pickering book, and also in the Tinto book, and the Parker Palmer book actually, it actually tells how not only you may be fearful, you want students to get X, Y, and Z out of the class, but the students are sitting there fearful themselves, fearful to talk, fearful to ask questions, fearful they might be embarrassed, they might say something wrong. And I did not ever imagine that until I read the Parker Palmer book or the Pickering book. I never imagined the students had fear. I'm thinking back to when I was an undergrad, and if I had fear, and I don't think I labeled it as fear, but now the more I talk to students, they're fearful of many things. So you kind of have to get them past that to engage, and I call that risk. Every activity we do, yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I like to use role play a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I teach in social work school.
Mm-hmm.
So the students are always very careful of volunteering to role play because it will reflect on how good a social worker they actually are.
Did everyone hear what activity she uses? She said that she uses role play, and students are fearful of that.
Right, especially if it's social work, so the role play is usually an application of social work skills. And they're fearful that they're showing up that they, oh thank you, sorry. But it took me a long time to realize that now what I do is say, play it the wrong way. And then the class can discuss what they do wrong. But then they're no longer fearful. But I tell you, it took me years to figure that out.
In what way? That it was fearful to them, or?
No, I knew it was fearful to them, but to figure out, ask them to play it badly. You're a bad social worker.
Uh-huh.
You know, do what you think you shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was okay, because then they could let themselves go.
Could almost be someone else.
And then the class actually learned a bit more about the right way to do it.
Uh-huh. I used to hate role plays, by the way. As an undergrad, I used to.
But
So.
I have to say it took me a long, long time to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so risk. So let's go on for a minute here. Help me define risk. I presented this presentation at the NEFDC. I'm just going to leave this because I'm going to be going around to other people if you don't mind. I presented this and I didn't define risk because I thought everybody was on the same page as to what risk was. And they weren't. On the evaluations, what they told me was, you never defined risk. I'm like, oh my God, it's a major term in my theory, and I didn't define it. So I think it's a discomfort for the teacher or the student, both of us. And I think it's a vulnerability, especially like with role playing, unless you're in the acting sort of, where you like to do that. So I want to open it up to you in the audience. What do you think also entails this risk? Yes?
So we talk about physician-assisted suicide in the death class, and everybody has something to say. You just have to keep a lid on it so it doesn't become emotional rather than intellectual.
So did everyone hear that? Okay, excellent. Yes?
Well, for my first 25 years of teaching, I was teaching adult students in a non-traditional university in the 40s and 50s. My adjustment the last 5 years
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
I mean, talk about videos, you know, VHS is, you know, the place that I teach has a new satellite center in the Twin Cities, and they didn't have a place to show a VHS. They only have DVD. You can't use your VHS anymore.
Uh-huh.
Like,
No, you can't.
you know, I guess it's a phenomenon of a gerontologist growing old. It's really made me rethink my teaching.
It does, and it's hard to, I was talking ahead, you can't keep up. The technology is just blowing by us to try to keep up with technology and how we can engage students with this. So what have you found that's helped you, would you say?
Well, I'm just looking at discontinuing using some of what, you know, anything from the 1990s is old.
Mm-hmm.
And even, you know, that's the first question a lot of these younger students ask. Well, what year is it?
They do. They ask that. I showed Miracle of Life. They made me feel like it was from the 1930s. Exactly.
So when I say this came out last year,
Uh-huh.
somehow it's more important to them, although I think it's really some good stuff from the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just making adjustments.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me think too, the technology itself. I mean, I spent a whole quarter trying to master the technology in one classroom. And, you know, it was really embarrassing. Actually, it wasn't hooked up right. Although I think I played wrong. You know, and they made a joke at the end. They gave me some kind of reward. But, you know, I felt embarrassed every time when the play wouldn't come on properly. And then I had to ask somebody. I asked somebody to stand on a chair to push the button. You know, I'm sure you're going to fall off. You have some broken leg. You know, I mean, you don't feel comfortable with it, and so you sort of start from a little bit of a disadvantage.
You do.
Gives them a chance to get engaged, and they get a kick out of it.
They do. And the IT people are your favorite people. I have all their numbers on my cell phone because I just, you know, I won't tolerate it. I think that's very funny. You went the whole semester and it was set up wrong. That would really be something. Yeah, it's not you. It's not about you. It's uh-huh. And so what helped you, do you think, just slowly integrating
I don't
technology?
I think eventually, first of all, I didn't have to teach in that room, so that helped a lot. And I think eventually I've gotten more comfortable, but I don't take the risks of putting on as much.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have to do it, I feel the mountain of the system work.
Mm-hmm. But you could build on that. When I said I teach interactive technology, people assume I do all the technology. Do you podcast? I've never podcasted. I'm not ready for that yet. I want to do what I do very well and move on to the next thing. So I think that you have to take little steps and feel very comfortable with what you're doing. But, you know, it's okay to show them that you don't know something. And, all right, so how else would we define risk? Go ahead.
I was thinking about delving into the unknown, and you rather understandable to use the technology when you're not necessarily comfortable with it, but I think that also happens with the students. And part of it comes down to how well you introduce the activity so that they have a good sense of it. But I think even no matter how well I present it, there's always this bit of unknown that's a little scary for students.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was thinking about with regards to risk, is if you're really not clear what's going to happen, you're taking a risk.
You are. Did everyone hear that? The unknown, if you really don't know. I had a speaker come once, and he brought his wife. And it was okay, but then the wife started to speak more than him. And then by the end of the class, she had us all up in a circle chanting and singing Kumbaya. And I had no idea how it got there. So we all walked back to the classroom. And so it's this risk of unknown. So when you do something that you don't know what the outcome will be, it's a huge risk. So we went back to the classroom, and the students just sat there. And they said, "What was that about?" And I said, "You know, I don't know." So I was hoping it would be X, but it's a fear. So sometimes you're going to fail, and it's okay. But if you could plan, like you said, to lay it out to them, it makes that transition much, much better. Go ahead.
One of my classes is a drug, alcohol, related class, and at the very beginning, you know, I think everybody in that classroom feels a bit uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do is I try to establish a safe environment, and
Mm-hmm.
I parking lot. And so it's really amazing because I have them do health reports based on a particular topic that they're interested in. And so many of them get up and it's like a testimonial because many of them have had drug addiction problems. And they get up and they talk about it. So my class is ending up more like a group session. It's one of my best classes.
Yeah, that's great. Yes?
The other thing is there are levels of risk.
The levels of risk, exactly.
And so it's important also to think about the resources. I mean, when there are more risk than there are resources to manage them at any given point, then the risk level goes higher. So things that are difficult for me and I know are risky, I start the class with talking about, for instance, technology. I would get the award for being a technology idiot. I tell them that. So I find out who in the class is good with technology. We have smart classrooms. I get a student to show me that he or she knows how to use it. Fine, you're in charge of that. Anytime we're going to use it or other things like that. So then I feel more comfortable. And other kinds of risks like the unknown and topics coming up that I'm not prepared for, or people getting into conflict, that I can handle. It's the other kinds of things that...
Well, you've done a couple of things. One, you've introduced a risk that you feel you have a fear. And so you put that on the table so everyone knows it and engage them by asking them to be the expert for you. I think that's a great solution. All the way around. Did someone else have their hand raised? Okay, so defining risk. I want you to be able to define risk the way you think risk matters to you. Engagement strategies themselves exist on a continuum from low to high. Low strategies, making eye contact, polling, humor, 1-minute papers, to high risk, clickers, role-playing, group activities, speakers, field trips. I didn't have speakers in that category until I had the last one, so she moved over there. Field trips, I take all the students to a funeral home. And to me, that wasn't high risk because have such a large family. I've been going to funerals my whole life. And after I went the first time, I realized some have never been to a funeral home. You know, they're 21, they've never had a death in their family. Yes, exactly. And then you start to say, what was the risk for them versus the risk for me? And then I have technology at the bottom. This is going to be a thorn in our side for the rest of our lives because, number one, we're not going to keep up with it. Number two, there's going to be no way we could keep up with it. I think you're born with a remote in your hand these days. You know, my kids at 4 were like doing the VCR. I'm like, oh my God, how did you know how to do that? So I think that we should just accept that and work with it. And I think your suggestion of having the students help you in that way, I never actually thought of having them help me with something that maybe I couldn't keep up with or didn't feel competent with. So here's the next activity I want you to do. What does your risk continuum look like? So I had you write down 3 engagement strategies, and I had you label them as passive, active, or collaborative. I'd like you to actually place them on the risk continuum with your vantage. Where do those engagement strategies fall? Are they low for you to implement them? Are they middle? Are they high? So order your engagement strategies on a risk continuum. This is where I introduce the other side of the coin. Have you ever thought about the risk involved for the students? And I never did until I sat with my colleague and realized that I was using one-way engagement. And I thought, if I have risk, there has to be two-way risk. Different perspectives. We as faculty think that we're doing X, and students tell us no, that we're not doing X, we're doing Y. I went to the faculty survey of student engagement at the national level and at the national level, and surveying both students and faculty and just the faculty. And I want to show you what differences there were in perspectives. So different perspectives. Here we think we're doing one thing. receive prompt, written, or oral feedback from you on academic performance. So on the left, this is what the faculty have said. Upper division classes and lower division. So lower division classes, 85% of the faculty said they were giving prompt feedback. Students, about 46%. So here you think you're really doing the job, but you're really not. And I start to think, well, what's their perspective? The next one, and this one really floors me. Here, memorizing facts, ideas, or methods, because to me this is engagement. This to me would be passive engagement. How can we take it to the next level? So memorizing facts, ideas, or methods from your course and reading. So we as faculty felt that we were only making them do that 23% of the time. And students felt that we were making them do that almost 70% of the time. So here we think that we're transforming our lecture material into something that it's just memorizing facts for students. And this was very eye-opening for me. A colleague presented this to me and she said, Laura, look at this difference. Look at the different perspectives here. So this sort of became my life for a couple of months. I was thinking of different perspectives, teacher, student. I went to a conference and I had everybody take 2 stickies, put one engagement strategy they use and where it falls on their risk continuum, and then take the same engagement strategy, put it on another sticky, and put it where they think it falls on the student risk continuum, because I wanted to see if teachers realize that sometimes they don't have the same risk. Something that's very low for you is high for the student. Something that's very high for the student is low for you. So I had them get up. There was like a room of 150 people. It was chaos. You know, I had one timeline of one risk continuum over there with some construction tape. I had another risk continuum over there with construction tape, all these stickies. And what we found is that, I want to point out to you over here on this one, is that on the student risk continuum, we have low risk. For the teacher risk continuum, look how much more populated it is. But this really blew me away. Student risk continuum, what faculty think is high for the student, look how low they think it is for themselves. For the first time, we all made the aha that maybe what's important to engage students is not so much the way you think they're going to interpret it, but where you think it falls on the risk continuum for them. I did a statistical test on this, and it was significant. So where the teacher feels it falls for them versus where the student falls. So I think that's one thing we have to put in our toolbox and remember. You know, initially, where does this engagement strategy fall for the student? So what I've done is I'm going to present to you my risk continuum of strategies. And this is a way I'm going to impart to you some activities and strategies I actually do. So before we get there, I want to just ask you, I want to open this up because I got so much conversation at the last conference I went to when I presented this. What do you think about this whole idea of different risk for you and the student? Just give me your top mind thoughts.
It puts a different perspective on it.
Puts a different perspective in what way, though?
Well, it makes, to me, it makes me reevaluate what I'm doing.
Uh-huh.
Just the way you present it, I think, and seeing what I'm doing in a different way.
Okay, so she's seeing what she does in a different light. Okay?
I think you're giving it a different language, and what I think all of us probably do is we get a class and you can either see the glaze, you can see fear, you can see anxiety, and at that point, if you don't rethink what you're doing, that's sad.
It's very sad.
Especially if you're getting angry, because that's the next step. They'll just get angry because you're presenting something that something is happening, you're triggering, and then an angry student is not a learning student at that point. That is not learning.
And they affect the rest of the class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but this language is a very, I haven't heard this language.
Neither have I. We scoured the literature. We looked for months on every database we could find, and all we found was an equivalent term, which is fear. We've not found anything with risk. So this is what we're working on next. So what other thoughts are triggered by risk?
Well, I have done interviews with people in 2 weeks, and I talked with them last week about what they were to do, and I thought I would give them some paper information, but it occurs to me now that this is really risky for them. I told them that it may be videotaped, and I get you off that. But I told them, I'm not going to look at it. I want you to go and see what you look like and come back. But now I'm thinking, well, we ought to do some role playing or something in the class to help them feel a little bit more comfortable. Maybe I'll just have them do it in pairs and and do a little bit of that.
Uh-huh.
So I think maybe I focus too much on getting the actors ready to be interviewed and not thinking as much about what the students are going to get out of this and how they're going to handle it and how fearful they might be, even though they know these aren't real patients, you know, but
it's performance.
it's performance. We're worried about that. Maybe I
Excellent.
should tell them it's just an SU grade, but I need to do, but that might be another thing to say to them, you know. If you show up, you'll pass.
Just breathe. Show up and sit up in your. Other thoughts on? Go ahead.
Almost entirely online because the students would be totally unavailable, like to go on a field trip or whatever. And one of the things, I mean, this got me thinking about, one of the things that I have students do is either do informational interviews or conduct their own field trips, and then they report back and we discuss it online. And I'm thinking some people, of course, immediately get that and they just trip on it almost. You know, they go here, they go there, they have all of this stuff. Other people say, I don't know how to, you know, they don't even know how to ask somebody. I mean, how do I approach this person? You know, I don't know how to walk into a place and find out the information I need. And so I'm thinking more, I mean, I do give them some guidelines, but I'm thinking kind of a toolbox that would be, I mean, because some people don't need everything. But for those people that need that, just figuring out how to get through that kind of initial, how would you do this?
And not die of a heart attack. Yeah.
Yeah, and it might be maybe filming somebody doing it. You know, that might help.
Or role playing.
Or role playing it, yeah. But I'm thinking about how to be able to convey that online. You have some kind of streaming video of showing somebody.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And
anyway, it's really good.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because did you ever have people do interviews and you get them back and they're just one-word questions,
Yeah.
or one-word answers, and then you realize,
question, answer, yeah.
this isn't an interview, what is this? This is a, so I think that helps reinforce that they're just, it's risky for them.
It's risky, yeah.
You know, what do they ask? What's the right answer? Do they probe? Do they? So excellent. Any other? Go ahead.
I have people do interviews, and one of the things I do to prepare them is I have them, after I go through, you know, what do you do in an interview, and this I do in class, but you could do it online also, is I ask them to just ask me questions, make believe they're interviewing me. And then they see people ask questions, and they hear my answers, and it really helps them.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I never thought of that, actually. So you just do it on the spot?
On the spot. And then if there's a question that I don't want to answer, I say I don't want to answer it.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
One of the other things that I've done in clinical, because I've been a clinical instructor too, and students are terrified going in that first day to take care of a patient. And it just seemed so natural to me. I didn't know what they were afraid of, but then I realized that they need a script. And I tell them to write a script, and I said, at the beginning of the script, write, my name is. You might be a little afraid and forget your
You're
name.
absolutely right.
And then, you know, if you have a script.
And write smile.
Yes. And the other way I use this is, for years, I have told them, you need to talk to your patients who are smoking. You need to say, have you ever thought about quitting smoking? But I've never really taught them how to follow that. And so this year I've been doing a lot more of, again, a script. So you go in there with things that you can say, and once you're comfortable with it, you'll be okay with it. But I've never actually thought about it in terms of risk before to the student, but I can see now that's exactly what it is. It's very risky for them.
Excellent. I like that. Okay, one more comment. Did you have your hand raised?
I have.
Go ahead.
I had students do journaling this semester. Didn't know there was a risk for me. Oh my goodness. And they had to summarize the chapter, just one page, 1.5, and then they do some critical thinking, and that's what I thought would be the risk. That they wouldn't get it, that they wouldn't be able to do it. They caught on. Once they got the idea, they're doing fine with that. The summary, some of them were just taking the information from the text and typing it. I said, no, this is a typing exercise. This is supposed to be a writing. They flipped out. Now they're terrified they're going to get a 0 on this So we had, all right, let's calm down and start over again. You need to summarize it in your own words. They had no idea what plagiarism was. Who knew? These are juniors and seniors. I had no idea what a big deal this was going to be.
So how would you change it in the future?
Instead of having the thing blow up and then bringing in somebody from the Writing Center, we'll have Writing Center at the beginning of the semester come in and talk to them about summarizing versus plagiarizing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I never thought of that in that level. What time is it? You just want of 10? Okay. So I want to show you what my risk continuum encompasses, and let me see what slide I'm on here. How many more pages do we have? Just want to make sure I touch upon that many, huh? All right. So activities and exercise. So here, this is my risk continuum from the student's vantage, not mine, from the students. Very first, book of the day. I've passed it around to you. They end up loving it. It ended up being one of the best things I've ever done. And it all started because I had the Alfred Kinsey book on human sex behavior in males. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I do human sexuality, and he was what I see the pioneer in the US. And so I passed this book around. And it was a New York Times bestseller. It didn't have any pictures in it. And I said to the students, look at this. It's solid data. And they loved it. And so it triggered from that point on. I thought, you know, they would like to see what books you have on your bookshelf. A second toolbox I've passed out to you. Top 10 lists. They love top 10 lists because it makes it tangible for them. Sometimes when you're lecturing, they don't know how many points you're coming away with. But if you say, I have 10 top learnings for this topic, they love it. And I took it from David Letterman. But I had to switch it because it was a risk, because the first time I did it, I didn't end with the best one. And so students were all confused because Dave Letterman ends with the best one. So humor. I use humor in every class, and it's gotten to the point where I begin every interactive TV class by focusing everybody to my humor of the day. And then we start. Here's some humor. Positive proof of global warming. So I said to the students, and lots of times I do things and I'm naive. I really am. And I said to them, I apologize that I didn't have this updated. I said, it's 2009. I only have data available to 2006. And it was kind of a fun, but I was serious. And so one student raised their hand and said, I'll help you out with that, because right now it'd be nothing. I said, thank you very much. There we go. We've updated our underwear list. Today it would be nothing. Mind maps. Mind maps are sort of a brain dump of an activity that you do, but it makes it very non-threatening to the student. When I take them to the funeral home, I actually have them write down the 3 thoughts that were triggered by the funeral home, bring it back to class. They don't put their name on it. They pass it out to other students. They get to read other students so they know it's not associated with themselves. Students love it. I end up producing an overall list of what everybody said. And here I do have a typo on purpose because I did the bloomers in the previous slide with the humor. So in the class, I typed in impact of bloomers on society and tried to see how many students caught on to that, just to see if they were paying attention. So, but what I'll end up doing is I'll actually get a final mind map of what everybody thinks in the class. And yes, it's more work for me. I have to go home and type it all in, but it's so worth it for them. Mix it up. I make sure that every class I do at least 4 different things. I think the kiss of death for any one thing is if you go in and lecture the whole time. So I'll do an exercise, I'll do a speaker, I'll do a book of the day. You know, sometimes you just take a 5-minute break. Let's talk about something else not related to this. I make sure that I mix it up, I call it. So I ask people just to think, how do you spend your time? So if you had a class and you were to make it a pie, how many different things could you feel comfortable? 3 different things? 4 different things? Media clips and videos, students love them. They're all over. It's up to date and current, which is what you were saying, which really matters. Let me see if I want to show this to you. I have 2 other things I'd like to show you. I actually have a video segment where I do a mind map and it shows me with the students. Can we bypass that for now? Because I think I'd like to cover more. If we have time, I'll show it to you at the end. Props. I use props and I love them. At first I felt silly. This was my very first prop I used. I pretended I was Harry Potter. I had this wizard hat on, and I had a little wand that blinked with color, and I had a little treasure chest. And what I did is I put my top 10 reasons in this treasure chest, and I brought it around to the class, and they had to pick one out and read it to the rest of the class. So I was terrified. The students loved it. I don't know, it almost took the pressure off of me and them to something else.
That's about the riskiest thing I could imagine.
Do you? Do you?
Is to come and dress like that. For me personally.
Well, they were very quiet.
Did it feel risky when you did?
Oh my God, I was petrified. I thought, oh my God. You know, when does it end in life when you can't skip around anymore, when you can't be goofy, when you can't dress up? You get to be an adult and there's a certain way to act for everything. And so it was so risky. I was sweating, I was nervous, you know, what are they going to think? And then my lights didn't work on my wand, and then, go ahead.
All right, well, confessions for Halloween in October, I dressed up as Maxine and came. And one of the students said, I knew she'd dress up.
Do you have any pictures of that? Do you have any pictures of that?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Oh, could you email them to me? I'll give you, that's great. Now there's an older adult whole chain of cards. Now another prop I use is Mrs. Beasley. How many of you remember Mrs. Beasley? Now, Mrs. Beasley was strip searched at the airport. I just wanted to let you know. Her hair was tasseled. Her glasses fell off. I felt very bad. The guy comes over to me and says, is this the kind of doll that comes alive? I guess there was a Freddy doll or something. And I said, well, she talks, but she doesn't come alive.
I do think you're the nicest little friend I ever had.
So my oddity of loving adulthood and aging, this was my favorite doll when I was 6 years old. I carried her everywhere. What kid do you know likes Mrs. Beasley as their favorite doll? Not many. So an activity I do with my students is I have them help me define aging. And for at least 3 semesters, I just couldn't connect with them. And I was home one day, and my boys, I said, this is a collector's item, don't touch it. But of course you say that, and it's the kiss of touch. So run over, pull the cord, and they said, Mom, how old is she? I said, well, her outfit tells me that she's a certain age. Those glasses tell me, but that dyed hair do. And then I thought, I'm going to bring this to class and ask the students. I brought it to class. You wouldn't believe the conversation that was triggered. They related to age on another whole level that I never thought they could. And Mrs. Beasley took on its own personality. And so I brought her back to class every now and then. And I have to say that this prop took the pressure and the risk off both the student and myself. So if you feel comfortable wearing a wizard hat, if you feel comfortable bringing in Mrs. Beasley. So there's just a lot of disconnectedness. You know, she has the glasses, which is old. The voice is old. The hair is dyed. So we really couldn't decide in today's day and age what age she would be, which helped us talk about how age has changed, you know, the increased lifespan and whatnot. And so Mrs. Beasley, I had to bring her to show you. Student goals, we've gone over that. Inside Out, field trips and bringing speakers in, to me the number one, and I never thought they would be. And yes, they are risky, but what they learn. I brought in older adults, and I was so fearful of what this would be. You know, students, I want to go ahead to a slide I have here. Well, we'll go back. I didn't think the students would appreciate older adults. So what I did is I lined up people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and 100s. I actually found some people that were in their hundreds that would want to come in because I was telling them about centenarians and, you know, you're going to meet them in your lifetime. And I saw this quote by Gubrium and Holstein. It says, they point out in their analysis of social gerontology, the perspective that is often neglected is that of the everyday life of the older people. And it is, because my students were so appreciative that I brought them in everyday people. A student said it was the way she brought in real people to show us. And I was floored. So, you know, they were still in the third person. They still were like these intangible entities, like a Mrs. Beasley doll, but, you know, I was connecting with them. So I asked them. I had 14 engagement strategies that semester. I said, which ones did you like the best out of all 14? The first one, PowerPoints. They felt it leveled the field. If they were at different locations, if they missed something, they didn't have to concentrate so much on taking the right notes, what to say. The second was a lecture. But the very third, which I never would have imagined, was the guest speakers. So for the first years of my career, I concentrated on bringing in speakers that accomplished big things in their life. I never thought about bringing in the everyday person that lived to 80, 90, and 100 and what made life special for them. Unbelievable. Guest speakers, they taught me that it's okay to get old in age. The guest speakers helped me to better understand what aging is like for a person experiencing it. Next problem I've encountered, which I'm sure you all have, the whole thing about ageism, making it real to them. It's always, they study it as it's going to be someone else and never them. There's so many myths around it. What the heck is old? 50. According to ARP and certain companies, 50 is old. You start to get your discount. To me, you're just a spring chicken at 50. I see old as 80 and 90. And if you don't make that baseline set with the students at the beginning, they think 50 is old. So I'll say to them, in my mind, 80 or 90 is old, not 50. Lack of excitability, believe it or not, for us, aging is exciting, but for the rest of the world, I hate to break it to you, it just doesn't do it. I've had students ask me, why did I go into that? Like they had a real concern for me. Why did you go into that? How does it apply to them? Could it? Well, it's gonna, because they're gonna live to 100. What are they gonna do with those 40 extra years, 30 extra years of their life? Can it be positive? Lack of personal connection, sensitivity to physical and decline and loss. So I think with adulthood and aging, those are all problems that I've encountered. The biggest problem I encountered was converting my class to an ITV. And so I want to just tell you briefly what that was like. UConn has 5 campuses across the state. What you see up there in the top right is the main campus stores. It's in the middle of nothing. It's in the middle of farm country. You have to actually drive 15 minutes off the main highway to get to it. It has 5 other campuses, but 3 are in such close proximity, they've turned it the tri-campus. They're 45 minutes away from each other, Hartford, Waterbury, and Torrington. I'm hired out of stores, teach in stores, and based in Waterbury, but have a tri-campus mission, okay? The first distance learning course goes back to 1883. I'm a history buff, so I had to know when this, when did all this start? It just started, what, 10 years ago? 1883. The very first course was called a correspondence study, and it went through the USPS. That's how they did their independent study. 1930, 40 universities across the nation had distance learning courses or correspondence courses. Today, it's one of the fastest growing, with over 60% of all universities and colleges offering credit degree programs in distance learning. So whether we want to accept it or not, it's here. Do we want to embrace it, or do we want to just walk away? So I said, yeah, I'm going to embrace this. I had 1,000 questions when they asked me if I would teach an ITV class. We didn't have enough faculty. The funding was low. They asked if I could teach ITV because I would reach 3 campuses instead of 1. I'm like, oh my God. So I thought, how do I engage the students? First question. Second question, how do I deliver a course at a distance? I'm not in the same room with them. I can't see them exactly. Are they happy with what I'm saying, not happy with what I'm saying? What will work? What won't work? And lastly, how the heck do I teach an ITV course? What the heck is it? It took me 8 months to prepare for this. 8 months. And I have a whole article in there that I've written on what it takes to prepare it. So maybe preparing your course, you could look and see what the pluses and minuses. So making it happen. I have to show you this media clip. So here I am at one site. And here is, so this is what it looks like. Well, let me bring it back, sorry. All right, let's just go to Waterbury. Now I see everybody there, unless Rachel just has the camera on the part of the classroom where everyone is. Wait, Barbara, you have a question? Barbara was a 78-year-old. She had a question about everything. I love Barbara. Anyone else in Hartford have a question?
No.
Waterbury, anyone there? Would you like to say something toward, if it's the government or the people in the country? Both. And why do you think both?
I think the government programs influence the people, but the people still make their own decisions. So a lot of it is their own background and their own.
Okay, so all I wanted to show you was what it looks like. So I'm at one place, and I could see the students. Then I have 2 other places that all I could see is through the video. So I can't really see their faces and their expressions. And it's a little bit of a lag time when you talk. So it's like you're watching CNN and you have someone from Pakistan, airing in, and you could see the mouth, the lips move, and the words aren't quite coming out right. So I had a colleague that came to do my teacher evaluation, and her one comment was, it's a three-ring circus. And she didn't say it in a bad way or a good way, it was just a matter of fact. For her, she couldn't have done it. To have to circle to all these sites. So we don't have time to do this today, but I wanted to ask everybody, so if you had a tradition from a four-walled classroom where everyone is in the class, how would you do it? What would you do to make that transition? And how would you get students engaged? That was supposed to be your activity number 5, so I'm going to just keep going ahead. What I have in here are some schematics that I've developed that actually helped me transition my class from a four-wall traditional to an ITV. Why distance education, distance learning, how to make it work. This is what made it work at my university, so maybe it could help identify some factors, because you don't really know what you're looking for if you don't know what you're looking for. I ended up having a hybrid course, which is blended. It wasn't just online, it wasn't just one site, interactive television. I actually rotated between the 3 sites. I felt that adulthood and aging was a topic that you can't just talk through the TV with, that you actually had to connect to the students. So I would rotate to each site. Every 3rd week I would see the students. And some students would follow me. It was so close that Torrington students would go to Waterbury. Hartford students would go to Torrington. I use an online management tool to help have a sense of community for the students so they could interact with not only people at their own campus, but people at other campuses. I actually, I'll talk about availability in a minute. I handpicked TAs at each site, students that already had me for the class, so they know my style. Training took 8 months, the technology, the equipment, the distance learning handbook. But I have to say that it wasn't until I had to change the mode of delivery for a class that I actually looked at my teaching pedagogy differently than I ever had before. And all of this, it was like an explosion. And I don't think if I did not, you know, teaching the 250 made me transform my class somewhat, but it was making it a distance learning and how I could impart all my objectives when nothing was the same except the objectives. And I have to say that was the biggest help in my whole career. Whether I hated it at the time, and even now I'll say, what am I doing with this? It's so much more time than a regular class. You can't just go in with your folder and shoot the breeze and talk about something else. I mean, it's very different. So the adjustments, I've taught the course 4 times. I do online surveys, formative and summative. I had to adjust in-class activities. I had to adjust out-of-class activities. I had to actually have them change their technology at the university. They had a one-stream system where they could only see 1 image at a time. So if I had a PowerPoint, they'd have to switch to the PowerPoint and then switch back to me. We'd come out not focused. People would get dizzy. It was like the Blair Witch filming. So they actually invested $8,000 at the university to get a duo stream, which means they could actually show 2 images at once. So they always see me, and then they always see my source. Huge with ratings. Student comfort with technology. They didn't have it. Imagine walking into a room and seeing microphones and TVs and no teacher. Students knowing what it is. Even faculty at my university still don't know what ITV is. They'll ask the faculty, their advisors, and they'll say they don't know what it is. And lastly, student comfort without me in the room with them. When I taught it at time 1, 20% felt comfortable with me not at the same site that they were at, versus 72%. After I had all of these evaluations, by the time I taught it the 4th time, it was up to 63% felt comfortable without me there, and 100% with me there. So that was worth its weight in gold to me. Student feedback. My teaching evaluations did not go down, which was what my biggest concern was. They basically stayed the same. Students, I like the distance learning classroom. To me, it was no different than a regular classroom. I feel equally engaged in each. I feel that I was given more resources to learn lecture, PowerPoint, and activities than other classes. I was more involved. Assignments I give, you could look at them in that. It's pretty much what we've talked about. But lastly, I think what's most important are the lessons learned. And I always ask students to tell me the top 3 things they've learned in a lecture. So I'm giving you the top 3 things I've learned with my last 15 years of teaching. The first is a page of 5 different things I've learned here. The redesigning of a course. Objectives stay the same. As long as you have those objectives, it's okay if nothing else is the same. Have your objectives to work with. And I think that you were saying at the beginning, one of you 3 here, about having the objectives or having the goals. I think that that's just the one constant that you have. The second, instructor rotation, to personalize the topic. I could never turn my class into a total web-based class. It would take me another 8 months to really plan how I would do that and make it. I would need a lot of podcasts. I need a lot of streaming. I would need a lot of me coming up and smiling at them. I don't know, I would need a lot of, but it would take me another 8 months. Teacher accessibility. They felt that I was more accessible with an ITV class than I was in a traditional 4-room classroom. Now this blew me away. They felt that in a traditional classroom, I was only available 63% of the time. But in an ITV, they felt I was available 100%. I let them call my cell phones. I got back to them on email. I got back to them on Husky CT. So this virtual office hours that I created worked better with them than if they had to make an appointment with me, which didn't make any sense at all. Lastly, engagement, whose responsibility? I've come to the conclusion that it's both the faculty, attitude, belief system, and you have to believe it's important. You have to believe there's risk-taking. But I also believe it's the responsibility of the student. It's both of us. You know, they have to need to see the value, and it's okay to point it out to them why it's valuable. They have to be willing to engage, and they have to be willing to take risk. So if they know you're taking risk, then they'll be that much more willing to take risk. So my last lesson learned that I want to leave you with is, can engagement go unnoticed with respect to time, place, space, and reaction? I had a student who I had for 3 semesters in a row, and she never talked. She sat in the back. She had her nose pierced. She was adorable. Always had a smile on her face, and I didn't think I was reaching her. And she sent me this email. So I've come to the conclusion that engagement doesn't have to happen immediately. She says, "Hello, Professor. This is Angelica Thompson from your HDFS 252 class I took this past spring. I just wanted to let you know how well I benefited from your class. On Memorial Day, my grandfather died early morning from a long battle with cancer. I could not believe that I would have to be using the information I currently learned so early, and that it was happening to my family. But with the Death and Dying Toolbox and the information from the class, I have been able to help myself and other family members get through the grieving process. I don't know what I would have done without the help of your class. I have been able to accept my grandfather's death and remain knowledgeable and strong for the rest of my family. Currently, me and my sister are helping my grandmother get through the funeral planning. The funeral was held today and went well. Thank you." So for me, it answered my question. It doesn't have to happen immediately. And this is worth its weight in gold. I engaged her on another level that I didn't even anticipate engaging her. And that darn plastic toolbox she went and got. You know, so I'll end with a quote from Sam Pickering with that book. "Almost never do teachers know exactly how their words or actions affect students. From my perspective, the handling that I accomplished so memorably did not occur. From her point of view, an offhand remark of mine must have seemed directed at her and provoked thought that rolled through the years." He received an email from the student 6 years later after teaching her. Didn't even remember her. She never talked in class. But she thanked him for how much he had helped her. So he engaged her. So now I'm thinking, there's another whole level of engagement. And it's not this passive one-way engagement. It's another different time processing sort of engagement. So now I'm working on that. So I want to open it up. I know we only have, what, 10 minutes? 1 minute? 1 minute to 10. If people want to stay for a few minutes, I'm willing to stay if you have questions. If not, I apologize for going. I want to really leave it from 9:30 to 10 to be open, doing stuff, so I apologize. But I wish everybody the best of luck with your teaching and your engagement and your risk. So I'll stay as long as you would like. So questions? Thank you very much. Thank you.
La cucaracha ya no puede caminar porque no tiene, porque le falta marihuana que fumar. La cucaracha ya no puede caminar porque no tiene, porque le falta marihuana que fumar.